All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you are not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page, or tune into 900 AM or 96.1 FM WURD. We will begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Kevin, and good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. First, I want to address what's on everyone's mind. Saturday night shooting on South Street, where 14 people were shot and 3 lost their lives. Last time we gathered for this bi-weekly update on gun violence, we grieved for the people of Uvalde, Texas, and Buffalo. And now here in Philadelphia, we have to come to terms with our city's worst mass shooting in recent memory. These latest mass shootings were all under different circumstances, but one common thread runs between them: the ease of access to guns. I know that Saturday's tragic incident has shaken our community. It has devastated families who grieve the unimaginable loss of their loved ones, many of whom were just out enjoying a Saturday evening in the city. Many other families are also reeling from the mental trauma and physical injuries to those who survived. I want to thank the first responders, emergency personnel, and members of the community who jumped in to aid the victims. We know all too well that the victims of such outrageous acts includes the families, loved ones, witnesses, and those who live and make their living in the area. For the families of the victims, please know trauma and health supports are available. If you are in crisis, call the Philadelphia Crisis Line at 215-685-6440. That's 215-685-6440. This hotline operates 24 hours, 7 days a week, and has behavioral health specialists ready to respond to those in need of immediate help. I know that the businesses in the area are on edge. Just like many around the city, I had an opportunity to visit several of them yesterday. The entire community is still reeling from this tragedy. I heard their frustrations, but I also saw their hope and commitment to improving the neighborhood. I want to thank these business owners for their honest conversations about what we can do to improve safety and security in the area for the residents and visitors alike. I know that you all have questions about the shooting, and the police department will provide what we know so far in a few minutes. Before that, today we have updates on legal actions we're taking as a city to enact and enforce our own gun laws. At the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Reno, Nevada this past weekend, I joined 170 other mayors around the country, all of whom remain as frustrated and disheartened about the topic of gun violence, especially the lack of action at the federal level. In Philadelphia, we feel so strongly that our ability to have some control over the guns here is critical to creating a safe city, and that we have gone to court to fight for the right in 2 cases. City Solicitor Diana Cortez will provide more information about 2 specific cases shortly. Also today, Deputy Mayor for the Office of Children and Families, Vanessa Garrett Harley, joins us to share details and information around summer youth programs, which is very timely with schools letting out next week. Now I'll turn it over to City Solicitor Diana Cortez.
Thank you very much, Mayor Kenney. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. I'll jump right into our quick presentation on the city's current legal affirmative efforts against gun violence. So if we can go to the first slide, thank you. So just as a brief background, these are the 2 firearms preemption statutes here in Pennsylvania. So when you were talking about the preemption laws, these are the 2 particular statutes at issue. As you can see, the language is very broad. And if that's not enough of a hurdle, the case law interpreting these 2 statutes has, in our opinion and in our fight, expanded upon that unjustly. Next slide, please. So with that, so our first lawsuit that we're talking about is Crawford versus Commonwealth. And in that particular lawsuit, we, along the city of Philadelphia, along with 11 petitioners, 11 individuals, 9 from Philadelphia, 2 from the Pittsburgh area, and Ceasefire, have sued the Commonwealth, the General Assembly, to challenge the constitutionality of those 2 statutes we saw on the first slide. So our lawsuit is stating is arguing that they are unconstitutional. Those particular firearm preemption statutes are unconstitutional, and Philadelphia, along with every other municipality across the Commonwealth, have the right to enact and enforce gun laws at their respective local level that would make sense for them. Right now, we are preempted from doing that. And that, as Mayor Kenny and other city leaders have pointed to, that is what is causing this influx of guns onto our streets. So we filed that lawsuit on October 7th, and you'll see that we were rejected by the Commonwealth Court. We'll get to that in a moment. Our other lawsuit is the city's first civil prosecution under the Lost and Stolen Firearm Ordinance. In that particular case, it's City versus Armstrong. We were successful in front of Judge Edwin Wright in the Court of Common Pleas. He denied a permanent injunction filed by the defendant in that case. And in this particular case, this defendant, like many others who are caught straw purchasing firearms, when confronted with why his particular firearm ended up in a crime scene in the possession of somebody who didn't have a license to do so, the likely excuse, the inevitable excuse most times is, I lost it and it was stolen. This particular ordinance, which in the city's view and in our position falls outside of the preemption statutes, this particular ordinance regulates accountability. It serves as a very useful law enforcement tool to try to get information as quickly as possible to solve some of these crimes. This particular defendant had bought 5 different firearms, 3 of which ended up in a shooting, 1 of which ended up in a shooting, others in other types of crimes, and the one that we were civilly prosecuting him for, ended up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And the defendant in that case appealed to the Commonwealth Court. So next slide, we'll see what happened in the Commonwealth Court. And as I think we all expected, the city of Philadelphia lost in the Commonwealth Court in regards to guns. So both of these decisions in Crawford and in Armstrong, the majority and plurality opinions were authored by Judge McCulloch. And what was the decision against the city was not surprising. However, what was surprising and encouraging is that in both opinions, for the first time, we saw judges stand up against this overbroad interpretation of the case law and stating that enough was enough, in that the circumstances in Philadelphia and across the Commonwealth required a re-examination of Ortiz. As you can see by the quotes on this particular PowerPoint, you see that Judge Ledbetter in Armstrong, what she had stated, and the fact that Judge Jubileer in the Crawford decision cited to that was encouraging to us. And then you can see the dissenting opinion by Judge Seisler in the Crawford decision. So what's the next step after these losses, but somewhat encouraging losses in the Commonwealth Court? So we're on our way to the Supreme Court for sure, at least in the Crawford matter. In the Crawford case, we had to start in the Commonwealth Court. So if you lose there, you get the automatic right to appeal. However, in Armstrong, we have to request the permission to appeal to the PA Supreme Court, which we already did on March 16th, and we're awaiting a decision on that. Again, what is encouraging and also I think consistent with the national trends is that a majority of the municipalities that we reached out to and across the Commonwealth support Philadelphia in both the view that the Lost and Stolen Firearms Ordinance is outside of the purview of the firearms preemption statute, and that local municipalities should have the right to enforce that. And we also got wide support under Crawford. A number of large and small cities, as you can see, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Delaware counties, and Scranton, agreed that enough was enough, and that Ortiz, in particular, that seminal case, had to be re-examined, and that cities and municipalities should have that right to draft, enforce local firearm ordinances that are narrowly tailored to the specific necessities of those municipalities. So we're waiting to hear from the Supreme Court on our Armstrong case. As to the Crawford case, we will file an appeal. I believe our deadline is June 24th. We will be filing an appeal, and we would await a briefing schedule from the PA Supreme Court shortly thereafter. So that's where we are in the Supreme Court. If we are successful in the Supreme Court as to Crawford, some of the ordinances that we would look to pass, that again, if you look to our complaint in Crawford, you will see that there is scientific data identifying how some of these ordinances prevent gun violence, in particular permit to purchase. Another one is similar to red flag laws. And the other one is a particular ban on, or not a ban, excuse me, a limit to how many firearms can be purchased a month. So those are just some examples of data-driven responses that we would be able to pass if and when the Supreme Court agreed with us and reversed the Commonwealth Court, and we would prevail in Crawford. So with that, I will turn it over to our Deputy Mayor of the Office of Children and Family, Vanessa Garrett Harley.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nothing is more important than the safety of our children and youth. In the midst of this incredibly uncertain time, the Office of Children and Families, including Parks and Recreation, the Department of Human Services, and the Free Library of Philadelphia, are keenly focused on providing safe, fun, and engaging opportunities for children and youth this summer. Students across Philadelphia will soon be out of school for the summer. Families and caregivers, I want you to know that there are still openings for our summer camps, summer learning experiences, and also summer jobs for children and youth. We don't want any student to be bored this summer. Can I have the next slide? You can find links to many of our summer opportunities at phila.gov/playitsafe, PHL, which will give you information as to a myriad of places where you can apply. Next slide. We are working with hundreds of community-based organizations across the city to provide free summer programs. Space is still available. I want to emphasize that space is still available and registration is ongoing for these programs. However, the deadline to register is June 23rd. So it's going to be coming up in about another 2 to 3 weeks. We want you to get on this as quickly as possible. These particular out of school time prevention programs run daily in community-based and some school sites, and they will be running from July 1st to August the 19th. And the age range is elementary and middle school students. And again, if you go to phila.gov, you can get more information about this. Next slide. Work ready. We still have many jobs available. And we want to emphasize that for any young person that is still looking for a job, that's any youth and even young adult, because the age range for eligibility for a summer work ready job is from the age of 12 all the way up until 24 years old. You have to apply again by June 23rd. We have over 8,000 paid summer work opportunities this summer, and there are still some opportunities left. It is both a in-person and sort of a hybrid of both in-person and virtual work opportunities. So please, again, apply as quickly as you can. You can either visit workready.org or you can call 267-502-3900 and someone will be able to help you with filling this out. Any young person who needs a job this summer should definitely consider joining our Work Ready activities. Next slide. Our Philadelphia Parks and Recreation Department supports over 110 neighborhood day camps across the city. Those day camps are for children ranging in age from 6 to 12. They're located in recreation centers, playgrounds, and parks across the city. They will begin on July the 5th. Again, if you want more information, you can go to phila.gov/parks-rec-finder, and you'll be able to put in your address. And and see what may or may not be close to your neighborhood or your home. Next slide. DHS Intensive Prevention Services. These are services that are primarily made up for older youth. However, we will take children as young as 10. This particular program is important because it is a program that will prioritize youth who are at risk for delinquent behavior. So if we have any parents or families at home that feel that they have a young person that is around them or their own child that may be getting caught up in some of the activities we're seeing in some of our neighborhoods, or they want some interventions, we urge you to look into putting them into one of our intensive prevention services. There are 7 different locations across the city, and they're all operated by various community-based organizations. If you go to phila.gov/IPS, you can get contact information for these organizations, and they offer everything from mentorship to life skills, but some of those critical things that we know as we're seeing the violence plaguing our city, decision-making, conflict resolution, and other things. They also provide support and counseling. And they will also engage a family and not just the individual who's involved. So I encourage you to look into intensive prevention services. Next slide. The DHS Community Evening Resource Centers are also available. Those are for youth who are looking for safe spaces to be able to relax or unwind from the stress they're experiencing in their life or in their community. And we will also connect you to some critical services and welcome you into that. These centers are free of charge, and they're located in neighborhoods to serve youth and family during the critical evening and the early morning hours. They run from 7:00 p.m. to 2:00 a.m. These are also places where if the Philadelphia Police Department encounter youth who are out past curfew violations, these are the centers that they would take them to. There's one in the South Division by Diversify Community Services, better known as Dixon House, and then in Southwest Philadelphia, Community of Compassion also has one. Next slide. Connecting with youth, I want to highlight that there's another important program that I'm sure everybody is aware of, and that's our Police Athletic Leagues, or PAL as we call them. We are excited to say that thank you to Commissioner Outlaw and the Police Department, as well as those of the leadership of PAL and over here at OCF. We've been able to come together and extend hours for our PAL this summer. It will be running daily. On Thursdays, it will be open 12 hours, all the way from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we've also been able to add a weekend hour, that a weekend day that it was not open previously, which will be Saturdays, running from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Again, this is for youth from the ages of 6 all the way up until the age of 18, and they will highlight fun and safe activities. They work on character building, my rate of both educational and athletic and recreational opportunities. So look into PAL a little more. Next slide. And then certainly last but definitely not least, we understand how important food access is for many families and children. We encourage you to go to phila.gov/food, and you can get a list of all the places that will be offering summer meals and other food resources. You'll be able to put in your address, and we will tell you all of the places that are close to you that your children or young people around you and/or resources for any family that is experiencing food insecurity may be able to go to. Next slide. So safety is at the forefront of our minds, even as we prepare for this summer and engaging fun. We want the community, parents, caregivers, and everyone to know that we work very closely with the police commissioner and her team. We share information on a regular basis. We convened a summer planning work group so that we can not only coordinate programs, but also make sure that we are doing everything we can to enhance safety at these various sites and centers. We encourage you again, any young person that needs a job, please look into this, and anybody who is looking for some summer camp or other positive activities for their young people, there are still slots available. June 23rd is your deadline for applying. Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Erica Atwood, who is the Senior Director for the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Garrett, Harley, and good afternoon, everyone. Given The tragedy of this past weekend. I'm going to keep my remarks really brief today, but I do want to uplift a program that the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Cluster is relaunching for the summer. Starting this Saturday, June 11th, from 1 to 3 at Wharton Square Playground, we are hosting the first in a series of second Saturday events through the month of June through September called Next is Now. Next is Now is a program that centers leaders the ages of 18 to 40 by providing a space for them to network, collaborate, and build partnerships together. Young people who participate in Next is Now are already leaders in their community and are engaged in work that strengthens their communities against gun violence and its impacts. I cannot stress to you all, the media and community, the importance of supporting and highlighting the work of everyday people across the city. We have a responsibility not just to spotlight the tragedy and bring justice to our communities, but we also have to highlight pathways to engagement and hope. That is our responsibility. By hosting these events, we're bridging the connections to our younger community leaders, again, by creating the pathways to collaboration, aligning partnerships, and connecting them to funding that is crucial to their efforts in their neighborhoods. Again, we will be hosting these events throughout the summer, and you can learn more about Next is Now by emailing cjps@phila.gov or going to our Instagram at PhillyAlive215. That's our Instagram. It's at PhillyAlive215, and you will see not only information about Next is Now, but our continued events where community members can get engaged with the city and with other community members, so that we can work together to stem the tide of violence in our community. With that, I will hand it over to Commissioner Outlaw and the police department team.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just a few days removed from the South Street tragedy, and our hearts still remain very heavy. The terror that the incident inflicted on direct shooting victims, the crowds around them, and the families of those who knew or believed their loved ones were in the vicinity has left an indelible mark on our community and our psyche. I'm hopeful that with time, we'll heal, but the cumulative trauma that our community continues to experience is having a real and tangible impact on our everyday lives. My ask is that our community come together and help their neighbors during this time of great unrest. Check in on one another, talk to each other, and if you realize that you need additional help, please do not hesitate to use the many city and community resources that are readily available for these very purposes. The South Street mass casualty incident that occurred on June 4th that claimed the lives of 3 individuals and wounded an additional 12 remains a very active and ongoing investigation. On Monday evening, June 6th, the U.S. Marshals Service was successful in apprehending Rashawn Vereen. Philadelphia police also were able to arrest Karan Gardner. At this time, the PPD is still looking for an individual in connection with this mass casualty incident, of whom we released a video and a number of photos last night. At this point in the investigation, we also believe that there may possibly be another shooter, in addition to the wanted male that we released information on yesterday evening. We are encouraging anyone who was on scene that believes that they may have witnessed the incident to please call our homicide unit at 215-686-3334. You can also contact our tip line by calling or texting 215-686-TIPS, 215-686-TIPS, or 8477. Please keep in mind that all homicides carry a standing $20,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest and conviction. And with this individual or individuals, the ATF has added an additional $10,000 per suspect. I've been very clear in discussing the need to have more officers on patrol and within our ranks. But the truth of the matter is this: in a situation like the one that unfolded on Saturday, when armed individuals decide that they're going to start shooting down a crowded street, and in a situation where individuals have little or no regard for their own lives and the lives of others, they often pay little to no mind to the presence of law enforcement. The sad reality is that when the individuals disregard the laws of our society and they don't fear the consequences of their actions, they're more likely to act out in ways that are detrimental to others. Our deployment efforts ahead of Saturday's events weren't made in a vacuum. Knowing that we would have nicer weather and that a number of public events would be taking place throughout the city, it was expected that we would see increased crowd sizes on South Street. Therefore, the decision was made to divert a number of officers from other locations to help address the crowd sizes on South Street and in the general vicinity. I'd also like to point out that the moment the incident occurred, there was an officer on the scene who engaged one of the active shooters and other officers who rendered aid to the dozen-plus individuals who were injured during this exchange of gunfire. We appreciate the quick actions of these officers. We need everyone in Philadelphia to come together and address this problem. And while we work on gun violence in this city, as a community, we can also address police reform issues. It's not an either or, it's a both and. The incident on South Street, I hope, has made it clear to everyone in the city that guns and gun violence are impacting everyone from every walk of life, from every race and religion, individuals whose lives make up the very tapestry of our society. And now more than ever, we need to support our police. I'm now going to turn this over to Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, who is our Deputy Commissioner over Patrol, will be providing an update on what has been happening within our pinpoint grids. And then he'll be followed by Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, who will be providing information and updates on recent investigations. Joel.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, next slide, please. I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart year to date as of June 5th, Philadelphia had 218 homicides and 974 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are down 4%, 218 this year versus 227 last year, and shooting victims are up 10%, 974 this year versus 885 last year. And as of yesterday, homicides and shooting victim stats remain the same. Looking at the bottom left of the chart, it shows the motives for the homicides. The top three motives again remain the same: argument, drugs, and domestic. And the clearance rate is now at 46%. Next slide, please. Okay, in this line graph, the blue line represents homicides and the orange line represents shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. If you look at the right side of the graph, you will see that as of June 5th, homicides are down 1% in the pinpoint grids and shooting victims are also down by 4% in the pinpoint grids, which is a slight increase when comparing last week's 2022 year-to-date totals with 2021. Next slide, please. As of June 6, 2,529 crime guns were seized in our city. Next slide. And lastly, in reference to the privately made firearms, also known as ghost guns, that were seized in our city year to date, as of June 6, we are now at 230. And with that, I will now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight. Ben?
Thank you, Joel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start by talking about the South Street mass casualty incident and where we stand at this moment with a brief update, and then I'll get into my usual investigative updates. As I believe everyone is probably aware, yesterday, as a result of diligent around-the-clock work by our investigators working with our partners at the ATF, the FBI, and all of our federal partners, we developed some strong video evidence, video recovery, and we put out to the public information about a suspect that we believe is involved in the shooting on Saturday night. And I am able and happy to say that we did in fact receive many tips to our tip line and to the homicide unit. And we followed up, and we are following up on every one of those investigative leads. And I can tell you that as a result of some terrific help from the public, based on the information that we put out, that we have some very good direction on an individual that was pictured in the video and in the still frame compilation. And we are working diligently to continue in that investigation. But right now, I don't have any further information on the specifics about who that is. I'm hopeful that in the near future, we'll have additional information and we'll be able to share it with everyone. So now I'm going to go back to providing the homicide arrest updates as I typically do on these press conferences. And since our last press conference, police have arrested 13 individuals wanted for committing homicides. And then I'm going to be featuring several individuals that are wanted for homicide and finally highlighting several recent carjacking arrests. So first is going to be starting with an incident that occurred in 2020, an arrest photo of Dennis Jones. And on June 2nd, 25-year-old Dennis Jones was arrested for the murder of 24-year-old Kashon Young. The incident had occurred on October 27th of 2020 on the 4200 block of Frankfurt Avenue. The arrest warrant was obtained back in November 16th of 2020, and Mr. Jones was arrested in Georgia on May 11th and extradited to Philadelphia and charged with murder and related offenses. Next is Nigel Drew, and on June the 6th, 38-year-old Nigel Drew, that's just 2 days ago, was arrested for the murder of 30-year-old Lamont Prophet, as well as shooting another victim who survived. The incident occurred on December the 28th of 2020 on the 500 block of North Crichton Street. Next is Samaj Nolan, and on June 2nd, 18-year-old Samaj Nolan was arrested for two separate murders. The first murder victim was 18-year-old Nassar Marks. That incident occurred on May 25th, 2021 on the 3900 block of Poplar Street. And the second murder victim was 18-year-old Kanye Pittman. That incident also occurred on May 25th of 2021 on the 2500 block of North Sydenham Street. The murders happened 30 minutes apart. Both of these cases had previously been cleared with the arrest of Zaire Crawford, in which I announced previously at a press conference back in December of 2021. Next is Kyle Bethay, and on May 28th, 25-year-old Kyle Bethay was arrested for the homicide of 27-year-old Jaquil Giles. The incident occurred on June 1st of 2021 on the 7200 block of Elmwood Avenue. Next is Kawhi Alton, and on May 24th, 20-year-old Kawhi Alton was arrested for the homicide of 20-year-old Tyree Wilson. The incident occurred on July 16th, 2021 on the 1300 block of West Hunting Park Avenue. I previously spoke about Mr. Alton being wanted at an October 13th, 2021 press conference. Next on is an arrest photo of Yasir Bass. And on June 3rd, 23-year-old Yasir Bass was arrested for the murder of 47-year-old Lawrence Wyatt. The incident occurred on July 20th of 2021 on the 1300 block of North 21st Street. Next is Nabri Watson. And also on June 6th, 2 days ago, 24-year-old Nabri Watson was arrested for the murder of 19-year-old Kamaj Rudd. The incident occurred on September 15th, 2021 on the 2700 block of North Howard Street. And Jermaine Small on your screen. On May 24th, 27-year-old Jermaine Small was arrested for the double homicide of 43-year-old Nicholas Ferrante and 38-year-old Christopher Mearns. The incident occurred on December the 3rd of 2021 on the 400 block of Passmore Street. I previously featured speaking about the wanted for Mr. Small as a wanted fugitive in our press conference on January the 5th. Next is an arrest photo of Karan Jordan. On May 27th, 22-year-old Karan Jordan was arrested for the homicide of 3-year-old Adonis Purvis. An incident occurred on January the 8th, 2022 on the 1500 block of South Edding Street. Next is Jennifer Disidario Smith. And on May 25th, 44-year-old Jennifer Disidario Smith was arrested for the murder of her daughter, 13-year-old Cheyenne Smith. That incident occurred on February the 19th on the 4800 block of Frankfurt Avenue. Next is an arrested photo and a wanted photo. The arrest is of Marcus Oliver, and the wanted is Robert Robinson. And on June 2nd, 23-year-old Marcus Oliver was arrested for the murder of 25-year-old Marquand Kellum. The incident occurred on April 16th on the 5600 block of Newtown Avenue. And in addition, 31-year-old Robert Robinson is actively wanted for this homicide. And next is a photo of Farquan Del Carnatin. And on May 30th, 20-year-old Farquan Del Carnatin was arrested for the murder of 37-year-old Anton Ellis. The incident occurred on May 23rd on the 100 block of West Logan Street. Next is John Doothwaite. And on June 5th, 52-year-old John Doothwaite was arrested for the murder of his mother, 79-year-old Noor Doothwaite. The incident occurred on May 22nd on the 200 block of Queen Street. Next, I'm going to be featuring some wanted fugitives. First one will be Zafi Huey. 21-year-old Zafi Huey is wanted for the murder of 25-year-old Brian Drummond. The incident occurred on November the 17th of 2021 on the 1100 block of East Venango Street. That arrest warrant was just obtained on June the 2nd of this year. Next is a wanted of Arnold Miller. 18-year-old Arnold Miller wanted for the murder of 29-year-old Lavelle Lewis. The incident occurred on May 22nd on the 4900 block of Aspen Street. That arrest warrant was obtained on May 25th. And next is Elijah Jennings. 28-year-old Eliza Jennings is wanted for the murder of 33-year-old Robert White. The incident occurred on May 16th on the 1400 block of West Cumberland Street. The arrest warrant was obtained also on June 2nd. If anyone has any information pertaining to these fugitives' whereabouts, please call our homicide unit, as the Commissioner mentioned, 215-686-3334, or our tip line, 215-686-TIPS, that's 686-8477. Next, I'll be talking about some carjacking arrests, as this continues to be a problem that is plaguing the city. We have some arrests. The first one is from an incident that occurred at 7th and Butler, and on June 3rd, two 14-year-old, yes, I said 14-year-old males were arrested on the 3800 block of Marshall Street for a carjacking that occurred at 7th and Butler Streets. The complainant was dragged by the vehicle when the offenders fled. Next, from 4300 North 9th Street, 20-year-old Dwayne Graham and 20-year-old Samir Corbin were arrested for a carjacking that occurred on the 4300 block of North 9th Street. And the next is from 5300 Addison. And on June 4th, 19-year-old Ronald Benson was arrested on 1600 South Lindenwald Street for a carjacking point of gun that occurred a day prior on June 3rd on the 5300 block of Addison Street. The firearm on your screen was recovered from Mr. Benson when he was stopped by police. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kevin at the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you, DC Nash, and thank you to all of our speakers. We will now move to Q&A for members of the press. And because of limited time, we ask that outlets coordinate ahead of time and that one representative from each media outlet ask questions. Reporters in this round are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer today, given the time. Armando is also available for Nash. So with that, we'll go down the line and start with Deanna Durante of NBC 10.
Good morning. A couple questions relating to or good afternoon, to the South Street shooting. First off, you talk about the different laws and ordinances you'd like to change, but these were 2 legally purchased, legally carried and concealed weapons where they started firing at each other. So how would the law changes impact that? And on that note, one of the second person shot, one of the shooters was firing towards the crowd. Why not any charges for him?
Well, I'll start out. First of all, neither of those guys should have had guns. One had a permit to carry. Years ago, in order to get a permit to carry, you had to show cause or reason, whether you were in the business carrying a lot of money around late at night, or you were in a security business, or you were, you had some ostensible reason for a carry permit. Obviously, the mindset and the actions of these 2 individuals would both indicate that neither of them should have had a gun. They both were aggressive. They both were violent. And I think the fact that they had the guns extended that confrontation to the point of actual shooting. As I said yesterday, without a gun in their waistbands, it would have been a fight. One would have lost, one would have won, and it would have been over. The Commonwealth changed some of the restrictions that we used to put on people to get a carry permit. I mean, it's like the Wild West out there, and the Commonwealth has put us in that situation.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll talk about Mr. Annie's second question, the one individual that's seen on video firing. The short answer is that's a determination that's made by a review from the district attorney's office after careful consideration of what is able to be seen from video combined with what the interviews have obtained. It's their determination as to whether somebody should or shouldn't be charged with firing their weapon. And I can just tell you in the case, which I believe you're referencing, it was determined that the one individual is firing in self-defense.
It's important. It's also important to know the system. The police department investigates crime, makes arrests, and refers it to the DA. The DA is an independently elected official who makes decisions on what to charge and who to prosecute. So that kind of questions kind of out of the second part of your questions, out of our ability to answer. I would have locked them all up.
So you disagree with the district attorney's decision on not charging him?
Anybody who fired a gun that day should be locked up. There was aggravated assault going on. There was other things going on. Again, the district attorney doesn't work for the mayor. The district attorney is independently elected, and they make their own decisions, but we present the information to them for their decisions.
Thanks, Deanna. We'll now go to Walter Perez of 6ABC. Walter, you're muted if you can hear us.
Sorry about that. Anybody who could answer this question would be great. Just with regard to the Odunde Festival, if there's any plans to add forces to patrol that, or any further concerns about the Odunde Festival?
No,
safety.
Well, let me answer. Before the police answer the operational question. The Odunde Festival is a long-standing, peaceful festival that's been going on in this city for decades. We do always have concerns about large crowds gathering. We have never had a problem at Odunde. We don't have a problem at the Roots Picnic. We don't have a problem at Made in America. We don't have a problem with the 4th of July celebration. Odunde is not related to violence in any way. So of course, we're going to have a large crowd, and we will have it appropriately staffed with police and other security to make sure that everyone's safe.
DC Dales.
Yes, and the Odunde Festival, just to let you know, that is one of our planned events, which the mayor mentioned. We have it every year. Last year we did not have it, but we've been planning for this event way ahead of time. And we do have units in place in the event we need to increase our presence at Odunde.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. Next, we'll go to Kristen Johansson of KYW. Kristen?
Hello. One, can you guys talk about the guns yet that were used in the shooting on South Street, and whether or not you guys have any of the ballistics back?
Yeah, I will tell you that we're still working on the ballistics forensic examination. I'm not able to comment on what the guns that we've recovered, but regarding the individual that was firing the weapon from American Street and firing that gun, there's no question that gun was in his possession. I mean, we have that confirmed. And then
when you say the individual, just want to clarify, is that Gardner, or is that the third?
Garner. Thanks. Sorry for any confusion. That's Mr. Garner. And that is confirmed. And then regarding the firearm that was recovered from the other individual, we're still working on the ballistics and seeing where that will take us, but I'm not able to report out on any ballistic information at this point. It's a big part of the investigation, and it will come out as more arrests are made.
But not even on the types of guns, like whether 9mm or anything like that.
I'm just going to leave that out at this time. Although I will comment on this, that the weapon that was recovered from Mr. Garner was a privately privately manufactured firearm, otherwise known as a ghost gun, and it was a 9mm.
The other thing is, Mayor, I know you've spoken a lot about how, people just shouldn't have had guns. But there's really a sense of kind of lawlessness. And a lot of the people I talk to say that it is literally shoot or be shot. And they feel the need that because there are no repercussions, like they need to protect themselves. And that's why they go out and get guns.
Look, I don't know what the reasons why people get guns. I mean, I think that if they weren't as readily available, people wouldn't have it as to the degree they have them. People, conceal weapons in their waistbands. Officers are not permitted, and understandably so, to just stop people and check them to see if they have a gun. City Council recently passed an ordinance that limited the number of ability for police to stop cars. So we've taken 6,000 guns off the street last year. We'll probably take close to that many off the street again. But I think far and away, the vast majority of people are law-abiding and peaceful people. It's just this anomaly of having a gun state and a gun city like this that has put us in this position. New Jersey doesn't have this problem to the extent we have. New York City and New York State do not have the problems to the extent that we have. But in this state where it's open seat, you can just go in anywhere and buy a gun almost. I wouldn't carry. I used to carry one, but it was a 6-shot revolver. I wouldn't carry one today. But the point is that it's just what we have to deal with. But I think in generally, people are peaceful, events are peaceful. It's just when these knuckleheads start their crap is when things go awry.
And I hear that, but 3 years ago, we had the same gun laws that we have now, and we had a much lower homicide and shooting rate. And
well, I mean, I think pandemic, I think that has affected people's brains and the way they act, and the way they act in public, the way they act in private. I think that's been a problem. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I can't explain to you what goes on in people's heads, why they act the way they do. But I don't think that we're dealing with anything different than almost every other city in the country. It's been ever since the last presidential administration, people are ruder, more in your face, more willing to confront people and to start arguments and go back and forth. I mean, there's lots of reasons why. I can't explain definitively why it is the case. But people have to understand that this is not a good thing we're in, and they have to kind of examine their own consciences and figure out how we should be able to interact with each other.
Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right.
Thanks, Kristen. We have to move on just because we have a lot of questions still to get to. Alicia Roberts from Channel 3.
Yep, good afternoon, everyone. My question is twofold here for the first one. Are you adding any additional resources for this weekend, updating kind of how you staff, any approaches there, and any policy change directives that you're given to your officers on the streets, meaning enforcing curfews, looking at gatherings, for example?
Commissioner?
Yes.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that, boss. Yeah, we are increasing our presence this weekend. It's not like it's new as far as the directive on enforcement along South Street. That has been done. As a matter of fact, looking at the stats for the past year along the South Street corridor, there were multiple arrests, whether felony arrests, misdemeanor, CVNs were issued, you name it, work was being done along the South Street corridor. This weekend is not going to change in reference to what we've been doing in the past. But we are increasing our presence. You're going to see more footbeat officers, more bike officers, as well as mounted patrol will be out there as well. Mounted patrol, they were assigned to South Street during the Memorial Day weekend, just to let you know. So it's not like we just decided to put mounted along South Street this weekend. So we are going to be present, and we will be working on trying to maintain peace along the South Street corridor.
Some of the videos that we saw, and even at the commissioner's briefing on Sunday, though, they said the crowd started to dense up at 8 o'clock, and we've seen incidents of like juveniles fighting as the night went on. Many who were on South Street told us they tried to get out because they realized that the tone was changing. I mean, what do you say to that though, when you're saying that you're breaking up gatherings and you're kind of trying to proactively do it when we see these videos? I mean, how is that going to change, I guess, this weekend? What's going to be different for the officers that are out there? Are they supposed to break up those fights with juveniles? Are they supposed to disperse the crowds? Like, what specifically are you telling them this weekend so that we don't see those videos?
Right, so like I said, what's going to be mentioned to them, the commander of South Street Detail, as well as the supervisor, they're going to stress the importance of, number one, public safety and officer safety. Number two, we're going to also focus on order maintenance, traffic and crowd control, which they will address. And as you notice in the videos, the officers, they were breaking up large groups. And that's one of the tactics that are being used is when we have a certain amount of officers versus a large crowd, we have to be smart and mindful as to how we manage and police those situations, because it can escalate into a somewhat close to a riot situation. So officers have to be smart as to how they police these situations that they encounter. Again, each incident, you have to approach it a certain way. We have to focus on de-escalation. As a matter of fact, when we had a meeting with some of the business owners, I was surprised to hear that some actually said that they felt as though that it was being over policed along the South Street corridor. So that goes to show you that the police, they are out there trying their hardest to do the best they can with what we have. This weekend, again, due to the fact that we had a mass shooting the week prior, we have to definitely beef up our patrol along the South Street corridor. But last weekend, based on the resources we had, we did the best we can with what we had. And I will say we need to focus on what was done, how we saved more lives. The officer who responded and actually stopped that other individual from shooting, there could have been more casualties out there. And on top of that, we had to transport 14 victims to the hospital. 14 victims. Police also responded quickly. They transport those victims to the hospital. So we need to focus on that. Everybody wants to micromanage what the police, what did they do or did not do prior to the shooting? I understand all that, but we have a tough job. We have a lot of things that we can and cannot do, but we are getting it done with what we can do and what we have with what we have.
Do your officers feel supported though if they make those curfew enforcements, if they make those large gatherings? I mean, we're hearing that maybe they worry about, themselves if they actually go out and enforce some of these policies, because it doesn't always feel like, one hand is talking to the other with regard to our leadership.
So with curfews, that's something different. We have dealt with curfews. So last weekend, we had a lot of juveniles along South Street. If we were to enforce curfews last weekend and be consistent with it, we would need we would need several buses to transport the kids from point A to point B. So the officers, again, have to be smart as to what they enforce and how they pretty much manage crowds that are disorderly. And they did it, I will say they did a great job overall. Prior to that, you haven't heard any major incidents along South Street this year, for the exception of the weekend prior, where there was a shooting prior to that. But other than that, I will say the officers are trying their hardest as far as managing those type of crowds along South Street corridor. So keep in mind that since after the George Floyd riots, things have changed as far as how people are a lack of respect for police, I will say. I'm sure you saw videos how officers were surrounded, how they were blocking patrol cars, how they were pretty much taunting the police. But it's a lot involved. And CVNs, people are saying, okay, you should issue no more CVNs. So it's easy to pretty much say how we should do our jobs unless you are in that police officer's shoes to actually manage and maintain control of a situation such as South Street. And it takes a lot of, you have to be very tactful as to how you judge based on what actions you're going to take, okay? So it's, again, please, please, please show support for the police department. Show support that, okay, I appreciate what the police are doing. All right. If the police officers are wrong, yes, we're going to be first ones to make sure that we correct them. But when they're doing something right, when they're trying their hardest to do the right thing, give them that credit. Okay. We need that support. That's all I can say at this point. We need that support.
Lastly, if I have one more second, are you bringing back retired officers too this weekend? I'm hearing.
Retired officers?
No. The support to staff up. Okay.
That's a discussion that we're having from a policy standpoint. We are supportive of a program that would allow recently retired officers who are still certified by the state to come back to work hourly, but it won't be this weekend.
And I know we're running out of time, but I want to jump in on that really quickly and address what was just briefly mentioned. there's a very human element to this. And I think people forget. We talk about law enforcement as law enforcement, cops just being cops, and we tend to see cops as just a badge and a uniform. There's a very human element to this. And I think we need to acknowledge the climate that we're working in. So when we say we need to step up and support police when we're doing what we're supposed to do, I think we'd be remiss in our narrative in saying, look, it hasn't been easy for us in the last 2 years. And when you, whether it's here in Philadelphia or in other places around the country, when you talk about officers being arrested and having to go to court for certain things, during times of unrest or whatever it is, it does have a chilling effect. And so what my message internally to our officers is, as long as you're doing what we're training you to do, you're acting within policy, obviously you have the support of this leadership, of this administration. Anything else I can't speak to, but I think we'd be very naive if we didn't publicly acknowledge that there has been a chilling effect over the last couple of years in our ability to do our job without the level of scrutiny that we've seen. So I just wanted to tag on to that and address that, because it is very real. And we know that as an executive team, and it's not lost upon us.
All right, thank you. Next, moving on to Jack Tomzik of Metro Philly. Jack.
Thank you. Mayor Kenny, I wanted to ask about these court cases. Obviously that's going to take time, and trying to change the gun laws. I think people, and I've spoken to some elected leadership as well, think something needs to be done at the local level as much as possible to try to reduce these shootings. I mean, what answers would you have for that? People who don't want to wait for these court cases or laws to be passed.
Did the people that you talked to suggest what it is we should be doing?
No.
Okay. We are doing everything within our power. Look, we were intentionally preempted by the legislature. They went out of their way to tell us we can't do anything about guns or ammunition. That's an intentional handcuffing, so to speak, of local government. So we're doing, and again, we've taken 6,000 guns off the street in the year 2021. And we'll probably take 6,000 off the street in the year 2022. Our officers are working hard every day, putting themselves in harm's way. Guns keep flowing in. You and I can drive out to Oaks and Trooper probably this weekend or next weekend and buy a bag of guns. We are doing everything that we possibly can, including going to court, to try to be the masters of our own destiny. And if someone has an idea on what we should be doing that we're not doing, I'm all ears.
And this one's for the police department. Can you describe the role of the person and the individual, the photos that were released yesterday? What role did that person play in the shooting?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. That is a person that we had identified as being involved in the gun violence. I don't want to. It's a person that we think has possible involvement in the shootings, and that's all I'm going to be able to say at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. And we do have a couple of more hands raised, so we are going to try to get to as many as we can. Next up, Ellie Rushing of the Inquirer. Ellie.
Hi, just to be clear off of what Mayor Kenny said, that anyone who fired a gun that day should be locked up. Did the police recommend charges against Micah Towns to the DA's office, and did the DA's office decline those charges?
Mr. Mayor, I'll touch on that.
I don't have that information.
Yeah, let me be clear that we work closely with the district attorney's homicide unit and the chief of the unit, and in a large, significant investigation such as this mass casualty incident, we actually go over everything in person, and the homicide investigators and supervisors show everything that we have. And on Monday, during the review with the district attorney's office, chief of homicide, she got to see what we could see. And based on the forensic evidence that was recovered, based on the video evidence that was recovered, and based on the interviews that we had, at that time, a determination was made not to charge. And that's that's for them. And in this case, it's not whether we would or wouldn't recommend. This one is in that gray area, and I understand where the mayor feels that anybody that's pulling a trigger is responsible. And I'm not speaking about a level of responsibility for setting off a chain of events that had a devastating impact on this city. There's no question that that's true. But in totality, looking at all the video evidence, that was the determination that was made, and that's their prerogative. And that's the way the system is set up right now. So we do it collaboratively.
I'm simply expressing my personal opinion. There was violence going on. That guy, even though it was determined that he was in self-defense or whatever, there was violence going on there. There was fists flying. There was all kinds of stuff going on, and he set off, along with those other guys, the chain of events that killed 2 innocent people, one a young girl and one a young man. So there should be some price, some inconvenience for that person who could have walked away, could have continued walking away, but came back and reignited the situation. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a prosecutor. I'm just telling you, as a citizen and as the mayor, that guy's culpable in some way about something. Now, when he shot the other guy in self-defense, if that's what the determination is, that's a determination. But he acted in a way that created a chain of events that caused the death of at least 2 innocent people and the wounding of a bunch of other innocent people. And I don't think he should walk, personally.
And has anyone on this call or anyone aware, maybe from the Office of Violence Prevention or other city groups, has anyone connected with families of the victims, both those who died and survived? Has anyone, reached out to provide any sort of support services or offered them anything in the aftermath?
Erica, Erica Atwood.
Yeah, good afternoon, Haley. Our Office of Violence Prevention, through our Community Crisis Intervention Program, kind of in our emergency response protocols, have been responding to those who have been victims of shootings and providing them and connecting them with the supports that they need, as we do with most shootings.
Okay, so you have connected with surviving victims' families?
And I can get some more detailed information, but I know we've done the outreach, yes.
Thanks, Ellie. We have time for a couple more questions. It's 2:02, but we'll go a little bit over here because we have some additional questions. Isabel Sanchez of Telemundo 62.
Thank you, Kevin. Gracias. Primero, una clarificación rapidito. ¿Esta persona que vemos en las fotos, Armando, es una person of interest o es un suspect? Para clarificar eso, por favor.
One very good question. If the person seen in the photographs is third person, is a person of interest at this time?
Yeah, I'll address that. At this time, that person is a person of interest. And the reason I'm reluctant to use the word suspect is we talk about suspects when we've developed enough information to be ready to move forward with an arrest. And right now, the goal when we released the photographs and the video was to identify that person so that we can move forward in the investigation. We were not ready to name that person as a suspect. That could change in the near future, but for now, person of interest stands.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
En estos momentos, Isabel, esa persona es una persona de interés para nosotros. No lo estamos nombrando como un sospechoso todavía porque no contamos con suficiente información para realizar un arresto. Nuestro objetivo, al haber transmitido la fotografía y el video, es lograr identificar a esta persona y para poder adelantar la investigación, pero por el momento no lo consideramos sospechoso.
Gracias, Armando. Mi segunda pregunta brevemente, recomendaciones para cualquiera que quiera salir a disfrutar del Festival de Odunde, del South Street, este fin de semana después de algo tan traumático.
My second question has to deal with recommendations for anyone hoping to enjoy the weekend in the South Street District and also the Odunde Festival.
They should come to the Odunde Festival and enjoy themselves.
Que vengan al Festival de Odunde y que se diviertan, básicamente.
Gracias, Armando. Yeah.
This question has come up twice, and just because Black people gather doesn't mean there's going to be violence.
Thank you.
Quiere subrayar la subalcalde de que sencillamente porque la gente de raza negra se junte y se congregue no significa que se derive en un acto de violencia. Gracias.
Thank you. And just to clarify, my question was not targeted because of Black people. It was oriented more towards it's happening in a nearby neighborhood of where this violence happening. And that's it.
And to be clear, if you can hear me, I
Yes,
asked as well because we have a special coming up and the producers of that special asked me to ask. That's the only reason I asked.
And I will, and not to get in a back and forth, and I appreciate both of you, and I understand the sensitivity of this, but this is more about perception and those who are watching, understanding that Odunde in particular is a 48-year-old festival in our city that is predominantly is African-centered and predominantly participants are Black. When we talk about those who are predominantly victims and perpetrators of violence, they are also tend to be Black, but I want to be able to delineate that because people of the same race gather, it does not inherently mean violence, and that's more for a public comment than it's specifically targeted towards either one of you as individuals.
Erika nos indica de que justamente es un tema de percepción, principalmente y sencillamente porque Odunde es un festival que tiene una data de 48 años que se viene celebrando en nuestra ciudad, y es un evento afrocéntrico, y sencillamente porque la mayoría de las víctimas y los perpetradores de estos crímenes son de raza negra, no significa que la gente de raza negra tenga una mayor exposición o mayor culpabilidad. Es una cuestión de percepción. Gracias.
Thank you, Armando, and thank you, Isabel. We did go a few minutes over. I apologize to the few reporters. You can follow up with us, press@phila.gov, if you have additional questions. That concludes today's briefing, and we're going to reconvene again in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.